Carlos Chassura. I'm the President and CEO of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce and the Brooklyn Alliance, and I'm thrilled to welcome you this morning to our second mayoral forum. This is an exciting time for New York City and a very exciting time for the business community as well. And we're thrilled to talk this morning about workforce development and small business issues. Last week, we hosted the 6 Democratic candidates. This week, we turned to 3 Republicans and 1 independent candidate in the race. The Brooklyn Alliance is the 501c3 nonprofit economic development arm of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. Last year, the Alliance was awarded a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to support the ongoing job training and workforce dialogue between the mayoral candidates and the business community in all 5 boroughs. By hosting this forum, we are ensuring that high-quality job training and high-quality opportunities for low-income New Yorkers receive much-needed attention from the candidates. We are proud to present this platform. We hope that this will promote open discussion about these important issues, and they will have a real impact on our economy and quality of life in all 5 boroughs. I think we'll all agree that small businesses are the lifeblood of our city's economy, and we, along with our partners this morning, work very hard to make sure that they continue to thrive. A warm welcome to our board chair, Denise Arbisu from Citibank. Welcome. And all of our board members. And a special thanks to the chamber staff for making today a success. Round of applause for the staff. A thank you to Rockefeller Foundation President Judith Roden, Associate Director Edwin Torres, Managing Director John Irons, and Associate Director Abigail Carlton for their continued support in this undertaking. Now, although we're in downtown Brooklyn today, this is a citywide discussion, so a special thank you to our partners who are with us this morning. First off, Lenny Caro, President and CEO of the Bronx Chamber, could not be here this morning, but he sends his regards. Jack Friedman, President of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. Linda Barron, President, Staten Island Chamber of Commerce. Nancy Plager, President and CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. Jennifer Brown, Executive Director of the Flatiron Partnership and co-chair of the New York City Bid Association. And Rob Burns, President, East Midtown Partnership and co-chair of the New York City Bid Association. A special thank you to St. Francis College for hosting us this morning. They always do a great job. Thank you to Rob Oliva and his team. Thank you to President Brendan Dugan. And let me welcome the Provost Timothy Houlihan, to come up and say a greeting.
Thank you all for coming. Welcome to St. Francis. It's nice to see you. It's especially nice to see Mr. Lewis, who is a friend of the college. He's been here many times. And I'll just say the same thing I said to the Democrats. Watch your language. Clean up after yourselves, and you'll be welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Special thank you, of course, to the candidates. And let me introduce them to you. Former Bronx Borough President Adolfo Carrión, John Catsimatidis, Joseph Lhota, and George McDonald. And let me just say thank you for being in Brooklyn today. Now, my former boss, Marty Markowitz, would say that's the only place you should be. But my colleagues here would say you need to visit other boroughs, of course. And finally, let me introduce our moderator today. I don't think he needs an introduction, but I'm going to try anyway, Errol. I hope everyone watches him at 7 and 10. Make sure you watch both episodes, not just one. He is the host of Inside City Hall. We all know Inside City Hall on New York One. It's really, I think, New York City's lifeblood to politics these days. Is it the road to City Hall now? In election year. In election year, it's the road. In non-election, it's Inside. And he's been doing a great job. He joined New York One in November 2010 as the host of this program. He was a columnist for the Daily News, had his own radio show on WWRL. The Village Voice named him the city's best newspaper columnist and radio host show. And by the way, if they say it, you know it's good because they're usually like throwing things. He went to Brooklyn Law School, and he is a proud resident of Crown Heights. So let's give a big round of applause to our moderator, Errol Lewis.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming out this morning. I've talked with many people about how many forums there are for the mayoral candidates, the candidates themselves. I think at this point I see more often than I see my family. But you know, there's really no better way for folks to get out and really see up close the candidates and get to talk to them one-on-one. So I thank you all for coming out and participating in this very important part, in some ways the most important part of this election season, at least the early part. Here's what we are going to do. I'm going to ask each candidate to give a brief opening statement, and by that I mean 2 minutes. And then the chambers, each chamber has its own question. Some of them are quite specific to those boroughs, but most of them really are applicable citywide, and that will get our conversation going. I'll just be here to help manage the time, because we're going to be asking the candidates to give brief responses. And then, of course, as the discussion develops, we can all get involved. I'm going to get you all out of here by 10:30, if not sooner. So this is basically about an hour from now that we're going to spend in this discussion. And I do want to thank St. Francis College for opening its doors, as they often do, to community events. Why don't we just start with Adolfo Carrión and go right down the row with a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Errol. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Carlo and Tim Houlihan and St. Francis College, all of you for coming out and for what is probably one of the most important issue areas that the next mayor is going to have to deal with. We know that we are the global leader in finance, insurance, and real estate. We also know that we are a city of commerce. We were born that way, and in order to continue to lead the national economy and the global economy, we need to ensure that this remains a business-friendly city, that is a city of commerce that ensures that people continue to come here, invest, take risk, grow their families here, educate their kids, and jettison them into the middle class and the American economy. We are a $1.3 trillion economy. We're sustained by small and medium-sized businesses that are the generators of new jobs. They've always been. We know that nationally. We know that locally. Over the next 35 to 40 years, the New York City population will grow by about a million and a half people. The national population will grow probably around 120 million people. We're going to have to build about 200 billion square feet of space to accommodate that growth. We're going to have to build out the commensurate infrastructure. And we're going to have to create a smarter city that continues to sustain and encourage investment and grow businesses. The difficulty that we have right now in New York City is that it has become increasingly difficult to conduct your business affairs in this town. I know that throughout this morning we're going to talk about our smartening our tax regimen, smartening our job training and capacity building regimen as a city. We're going to have to talk about the failure of our education system to generate the kind of smart workforce for a modern economy where the tech sector is the fastest growing sector and we're not keeping up. So in order for that to happen, we're going to have to retool our education system to create the kind of workforce that is able to work in the businesses across the city. We're going to have to ensure that we house the workforce and that we deal with the issue of affordable housing so that the workforce that sustains our economy, that keeps us competitive, can live in New York City and make the choice of staying local. So we've got a lot of work to do. The next mayor is going to have to tackle some of these very important issues of transportation, of movement of people and goods in a sustainable way as we grow into the middle of this century by the number that we believe we're going to grow. New York City has to remain competitive. I am committed to ensuring that New York City remains the global leader and that we transform our economy from a fire economy, finance, insurance, and real estate, to a freight economy, finance, real estate, and information technology, which is the wave of the future.
Thank you.
New York is the greatest city in the world. I grew up and spent all my life in New York City. I went to public schools. I went to Brooklyn Tech, just a ways from here. And I want to do what's necessary to keep New York going in the right direction. We've been going in the right direction for the last 20 years, and I want to make sure we don't fall and go in the wrong direction. I grew up on the poor side of town. I grew up on 135th Street by City College. And I didn't go from Harvard or Yale straight to Goldman Sachs or Salomon Brothers. I grew up on the streets. I grew up as a store owner. I feel the pain of every one of the store owners in those Chamber of Commerces. I'm the one, I get the same parking tickets, sanitation tickets, all the water bills that are out of control. So whom do you trust to put the city into proper shape and to feel the pain of all the people? I feel the pain of the bankers, but I also feel the pain of the store owners and the people of the outer boroughs. That's what I want to do, is put together. I think, I've announced already, I said we should have, we have a consumer advocate. We should have a business advocate. Someplace where small business people can go and said, I got a $5,000 water bill. What do I do? We don't have anything like that. We need, some place for small business people to appeal their problems and make the city more livable for all of us. I believe in safety. I don't believe in giving up the streets back to the hoodlums. Everybody remembers what the 1980s were like. I'm tough, but fair. I believe in leadership. I will lead in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and I want to thank the sponsors as well as St. Francis College for having us here this morning, and it's great for having all of you here in my neighborhood where I've lived for the last 26 years, so thank you. I agree with everything that Adolfo has said, and I've agreed with everything that John has said. This city is at a pivotal point in this current election as to, for the next mayor, what is the direction of the city going to go in? For the last 20 years, we've seen a revitalization of the city. We've seen a reduction in crime. We've seen an increase in the quality of life. We've seen growth outside of Manhattan in each and every one of the boroughs that we have never experienced before and we've never seen before. But we need to focus on the infrastructure in all of our boroughs. We need to focus on our transportation. We need to focus on ways in which products and goods and services can get into the communities, because right now the traffic and the bottleneck problems that we're having the government is really not doing anything about. The reality is the most important thing that the government can do is to assist the local economy in creating jobs. And as mayor, that's what I will focus on day in and day out, finding ways to reorganize our city government, because our city government, with all the changes that have happened in the last 20 years, it has not restructured itself. We're at a point in time where our government is actually strangling small and medium-sized businesses in all of the boroughs. As John has mentioned, he's experiencing the fines and the fees and the increased property taxes, as well as the increased water bills, without seeing any additional services from the city. And when you interact with the city of New York, whether you're an individual or a business person, when you interact with the city of New York, it's actually a discombobulated organization. If you have to deal with the Department of Consumer Affairs, if you have to deal with the Department of Health, if you have to deal with any of the city agencies, they're not coordinated. And it's important that the next mayor restructure the government to focus the government on what a 21st century government should look like. Technology is not being used. If you by chance go into any one of those agencies, there's no question that you will see something that's archaic, an IBM correcting selector. is in every single one of the government offices. And when you see it, it's extraordinary that they're still in place. What's even more extraordinary, 6 months ago, the Bloomberg administration put out an RFP for typewriter repair service. I have no idea how they're going to deal with that. But the issue is not repairing the typewriters, it's throwing them out, computerizing it, bringing the government of the city of New York up to the 21st century. It is very, very important. And what I really believe as we go forward is that the next mayor is going to be a person who will be a leader, will move the city forward, and not only in trying to create jobs, but also in educating our children. One critical factor that we need to have is we need to look at our education system. While mayor has control and it has made advances, it needs to make significantly more advances. We need to have a program that teaches our children some of the really core basics, again, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. We know from the students that are entering our public higher education system, the city university, almost 80% of them are deemed incapable of doing college-level education. If you can't do reading, you can't do writing, you can't do arithmetic, you're not going to be able to function in our society. It is critical that the mayor focus on that in the public school education. I'm looking forward to being your mayor. I'm looking forward to this debate. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you. I'm George McDonald. I'm the founder and president of the Doe Fund, and I am running for mayor of the city of New York. I'm excited about the opportunity that the city has for the future. I'm not worried about slipping into our deep, dark past. I think that what we have to do is preserve the gains that we've made and improve on those gains. I think that that's the role that any of us would play as mayor. I remember years ago walking by Ed Koch was mayor, and they were replacing the steps on the front of City Hall. I said, tear it all down. And then I said to myself, you don't really mean that. You don't want them to tear it down, because what would you replace it with? And that's the point. We have to preserve these gains that we've made in public safety and in all the other areas of our city. And we have to make sure that when people talk about a rising boat, a rising tide lifts all boats, that we know in our society that that's not true. There are people who are anchored with chains to the bottom of the ocean floor when the tide rises. And I've been working with them for the past 25 years. So if you want to talk about workforce development in New York City, elect me mayor of the city of New York. The first thing that I would do is create a deputy mayor for workforce development. I think that, as Joe says, the government needs to be reorganized, and I think that one of the key areas of reorganization is around workforce. I think that the city of New York has enormous buying power, and I think that we ought to be able to focus that more and more and more towards creating jobs in our city. So if we buy applesauce, why would we buy apple? Everybody laughs at applesauce, but I don't know why. Because if you buy applesauce from China, right? If you buy applesauce from China and you pay a couple cents less, that's one way of purchasing it. If you build a factory in the Bronx and you manufacture it there and you employ people and you pay a couple cents more, but you're getting a bang for your dollar because the person isn't committing crimes and going to prison and all of those things that we know. That's how we have to think as a city, and I'm fully prepared to do that. 25 years ago, I went to Grand Central Terminal, and I fed homeless people at 10 o'clock at night. I did that for 700 nights in a row. And while they appreciated the sandwich, what they really wanted, and I heard it over and over and over again, was a room and a job to pay for it. And I set out to do that. And we created a workforce from the people there that has generated in revenue since then $700 million. And we put $250 million into the pockets of the people that we set out to help. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do that for all of the homeless people that are laying around costing taxpayers money in the shelter system. They can go to work. There's no reason why they can't go to work except for the will of the government. You elect me mayor, and everybody will work. That's my platform, full employment for New York City. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, candidates. I'm going to turn it over now to the chambers. We're going to start with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and we'll get a question from Carlos Asura.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to ask two because I got voted to ask my colleague from the Bronx's question, who's not here. First question is really about long-term job training. We know New York City spends a lot of money on training, but we're not sure if it's really working. So what is your plan or vision for a long-term job planning and placement job training and placement program for the city? So that's part one. And part two is, what would you do to bring manufacturing back to the 5 boroughs?
I went to public school. I went to PS 192. I went to Brooklyn Tech. That our school system is broken. We have a 40% dropout rate. Of the 60% that graduated, and they tried to apply to City College. City College has made an announcement a few weeks ago that 81% of them couldn't read, write, or do arithmetic at college level. That's a sin. I proposed that during high school, we don't force these kids, like we started 30 years ago, to go strictly academic. I mean, we are forcing these kids to do things that they can't do. I can't be a pianist. I can't be a bricklayer, but I can do certain other things well. So my proposal was, let's give the kids an option, not an obligation, and we're not going to force anybody, to teach them how to be plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and give them an opportunity to earn a living and make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, instead of letting them drop out. And the city has called me, and they love the idea, because we need to train these people to do something. And we're not. And you know what happens when a kid drops out? Because I came from those neighborhoods. When a kid drops out, he goes and gets a job for $8 an hour at Burger King, at Walmart, at McDonald's. And you know what happens? I can talk like that because I came from those neighborhoods. You become a prisoner of those neighborhoods. And then we have to give them food stamps. And we make them more of a prisoner. And then we have to give them whatever else. I want to teach these kids how to escape the way I learned. I worked hard, and I escaped. And I think it's crucial that we save these kids. And that's my duty in education, is to save these kids. I don't remember what your second question was, but
Manufacturing.
I think we have to go high-tech manufacturing. You're not going to get the low-tech manufacturing anymore. I think we have to bring in biotech, technology, and increase those jobs where, again, it's not $8 an hour jobs or $10 an hour jobs or $12 an hour jobs. Let's bring in high-tech companies that are going to be paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to New Yorkers. And I plan on that. I have a whole program on how to do it. And that's my plan. Thank you.
Job training, if I can. Job training, job development, workforce development is something that clearly the city of New York needs to focus on. John's approach of having vocational education is very, very important. The city currently has 42 different schools that currently are teaching vocational education, from automobiles management to automobiles, to plumbing, to all kinds of services that are necessary. But the reason why the vocational education is not focused on right now is that the city's overall idea is that our students are in classrooms that are way too large. They have teachers who are not motivated to teach. And at the same point, all of these there are 108 separate vocational programs that the city has. And the fact of the matter is a combination of things that are really important. By the time they get to these vocational schools in high school, if they can't read, if they can't write, they're not going to be able to succeed. You do need, if you're a plumber, you do need to know mathematics. You do need to know how to read. It's a critical part of it. So the academic component is as equally as important, especially at the very, very younger ages. Because, you don't want a carpenter who doesn't understand angles. It's as simple as that. And we've got to get our kids at the youngest possible ages so that when they get to high school, they can have the job training. There's all kinds of money that's being spent by the city of New York, most of it coming from the federal government for all of these job training programs. The fact of the matter is you really have to question the role of government in job training programs because they have no way of evaluating whether or not they're spending that money properly. There's no follow-up with the programs. What I think is really important is that the city of New York create an environment using technology to find out what jobs are available, and then use the money that the city has to help and create jobs, not necessarily jobs for government, but help the private sector have an economy that will allow them to create the jobs, and then be able to use the government to match the people with the jobs. That's where the government will do the most amount of good. Having training programs and workforce development programs is not as important as being able to government to match the two together. The people who want a job and the companies and the businesses that are growing and creating the jobs. As far as the development of manufacturing in the city, I think we need both the low-tech and the high-tech. What we're seeing here in Brooklyn, in Sunset Park and at the old Army Terminal right now, is because of supply chain management. We're actually seeing the manufacturing and the actual putting together of clothing again in New York. We never thought that would happen, but the fact of the matter is, because of on-time requirements of getting them into the retail stores and how long it takes for various different clothing items that are mostly made in Asia to come here, they're actually now being made here in Brooklyn again. We can combine both the high-tech, which we absolutely need. We're now the second largest high-tech center in the country, following what we have in Silicon Valley. We're now beating Boston's Route 128 for high technology. We need to continue that. But at the same point, we need to also look at what we've done to our old manufacturing areas. Our old manufacturing areas have been now zoned for housing. And we have a significant problem with what the zoning has gone on. There was a vision that manufacturing would never come back to New York and that we wouldn't have these essentially entry-level jobs ever again. So the desire is, in the waterfront in Greenpoint and the waterfront in parts of the Bronx, which were once manufacturing, are now becoming part of a housing community. We really need to rethink that. We really need to rethink our zoning from a point of view is how do we combine both? And we're going to need to have mixed-use neighborhoods. We're going to need to have both high and low-tech clean manufacturing so that you can combine both residential and manufacturing together in the same communities. It's very, very important that this be done on a very much a comprehensive approach, that we look at what jobs are available and what the city can do to create the jobs. All of us will tell you here, because we're sitting up here for one reason. We actually believe the cost of doing business in New York is way too high. And the next mayor of the city of New York is going to have to focus on getting the cost of doing business in New York down. Studies from Brookings show that it costs 212% of the national average to have a business in New York. 212% of the national average. There's a reason why businesses start here and then leave here, because they can't sustain themselves if we don't bring the cost of doing business down.
So the deputy mayor for workforce development would have, as part of the responsibility of that office, the matching of, as Joe's correct, where we have jobs and we have people that need the jobs, but the skills of the people don't match up to the jobs. Business, has a problem in training people for specific jobs. If there are intermediaries that do it, and I'm associated with many groups that do what we call re-entry, when people are coming home to the city, and we act as intermediaries for employers, for organizations. And we actually, in staffing up a facility that we have in East Williamsburg here some years ago, we used the Brooklyn Chamber and their Good Help program, where they actually did the preliminary interviews for 150 employees that we eventually hired, many of whom are still working there. So those kind of synergies, I think, are very important. The Workforce One, which we used to call one-stops, don't work for the vast majority of people who need the jobs. There's maybe 350,000 unemployed folks in the city of New York now, and that doesn't include the people who are what they call discouraged workers, who are not actually looking for jobs. And the Workforce One centers get 27,000 people, help 27,000 people through the year. So they don't help people with multiple barriers to employment. And unfortunately, in New York City, we have many large groups of people with multiple barriers to employment. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that they can't work? No, just the opposite, that we have to invest our time and energy and efforts into providing the proper training to be able to get them into the workforce. Because every time we do that, what do? We take something from the bottom, in other words, a burden to the taxpayers, and create tax-paying, contributing members of society. So every person that we want to do that with is a big gain for not only that person, but for all of us. As far as manufacturing goes, I will go back again to full employment and the idea of leveraging the purchasing power of the city of New York to focus on creating new businesses and creating new jobs. Job growth comes from the creation of small businesses. Everybody knows that. So how successful has the Brooklyn Navy Yard been? I don't think that there's any space left. So I think that we probably should look for more opportunities to create industrial spaces like the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Well, where would we find those spaces? Well, there's brownfields, aren't there? There's environmental cleanup sites where we can then use these spaces for industrial and manufacturing efforts. And I think that's how we have to go. There's a program called 421G, and affordable housing is the key to anything that we do in workforce development because people have to live here. So I have a program where we're going to build 75,000 micro units. Those are, in the old days, we would call them SRO units, but in this century, we're going to call them micro units and not have the bad connotation that we used to have. We built one, the Doe Fund, in the year 2000 on East 117th Street, 74 units, 275 square feet, kitchen, bathroom, closet, $500 a month. And we can build them across the city. 421G is a program that converts industrial space where we don't need it into affordable housing. So that's going the other way. And we have to look at areas of our city that maybe need to be rezoned for commercial activities.
Carlo, I think that there's an underlying insidious problem that we face as a whole that we have to address. It's a fundamental sort of building block for any good economy. And that is that we have to have a good education system that turns out people with the basic skills to begin to climb the ladder. And we ought to continue to be a ladder economy, an aspirational economy, an economy where people come in, they get the basic tools at the bottom, and then they begin to climb and apply those tools, and then we create the systems to be able to refine those tools for the marketplace so that they can continue to climb the ladder. Right now, there are 3,000 high-tech jobs in small businesses that are going unfilled in New York City, 3,000 jobs. We're having to figure out how to import people from other places, engineers, scientists, techies, to be able to fill those positions for jobs that would otherwise make New York City and those businesses competitive with Silicon Valley or other, biotech centers, for instance, that we're competing against right here on the Eastern Seaboard. So there is a dangerous tipping point here if we don't hurry up and retool our job training system. So I would advance a very aggressive job training system that addresses what I call a demand-driven training system that looks to give people the tools for what the marketplace needs. Wow, innovative, right? And I know when you talk to business people around the 5 boroughs, when I was borough president for nearly 8 years, working closely with lots of businesses, the tack that I took, the platform that I advanced was, one, the best social program is a job. Everybody's come here to progress. We cannot allow, as John suggests, for people to remain stuck, to remain paralyzed, to be permanently tethered to the bottom. We need to break that tether and allow them to rise. In order for that to happen, we need to fix the school system. We need to retool our job training programs so that they're relevant to the needs of the marketplace. What the small business community will tell you is, I can't find good people. And if I find them from the programs, and we have the Workforce One, the career development programs, we have an alphabet soup of programs that we all know about. We've all tried to advance. Joe, when he was deputy mayor, tried to advance it during the Giuliani administration. We've tried again and again. But these folks, we prepare them for the interview. We put them in the interview. They answer the questions all correctly. They suit up right. But inside, there is not the fundamental building blocks to allow them to retain the job. So we're very good on placement. We can get you the person, put them in, get them in the door, and have them sit at a desk or operate something. But then to hold that person, you've got to have somebody that has the fundamentals together, the basics together, the language skills, tech skills, the right disciplines. So one, we need to ensure that we have a relevant and demand-driven training regimen. And we have to move emphasis from placement to retention, the viability of an employee to remain, and then we have to also start to retrain people for what's necessary for them to keep a job. On the manufacturing side, I think one of the biggest tools we should use is our land use powers, and I agree that we may have gone overboard in assuming that the manufacturing was leaving America's shores and going to cheap labor markets forever. We've since grown up and matured and understand that it is environmentally unsustainable, that it's economically not smart for us to rely on labor markets far away and all the shipping that's involved in getting products here. When we have, for instance, in a city like New York, an unemployment rate that is 2 points higher than the national unemployment rate. But if you go to the sector of the potential workforce in the minority communities and the neighborhoods of the city where you have black and brown folks, you're talking about 15, 16, 17, 18% unemployment, multi-generational paralysis, people not able to enter, or if they enter the workforce, not able to remain in the workforce. We're not preparing the workforce to even sustain a manufacturing economy, to fill those low-tech, high-tech manufacturing jobs. We need to incubate them. So on the front side, we know what we need to do. On the back side, we need to ensure that we create the platforms, the Brooklyn Navy Yards of the world. In the South Bronx, we have an opportunity. There's a whole band in Port Morris of old manufacturing buildings that can be retooled and put back out into the marketplace. And finally, the last piece is we finally have to get to the point, if we're going to compete against Silicon Valley and other places, we need to become the leading broadband city. In order for us to become the smart city where you can conduct business without having to show up at an office and stay at your workplace and stay productive, we're going and create that smart smart, rapid city that is able to respond to the needs of the global marketplace, let alone the neighborhood. We're going to have to build our infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and I would entirely focus on that.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask the candidates to be just a little more concise and get to some 1-minute answers because we've got a lot of questions that touch on a number.
I was making up for my brief opening.
I wasn't directed at you, Mr. Borough President. Nancy from the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce has the next question.
Thank you, Errol. And thank you, Carlo, and thanks to the Brooklyn Chamber for hosting this morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. My question today, I'm going to go to my second question, was about transportation. We have in Manhattan in particular seen a proliferation of the bike lanes all over the city, primarily south of 96th Street down to the tip of Manhattan. This has really created some conflicts, some difficulties for businesses where some of the bike lanes, and especially now with the new bike share program coming out, that they've been put in front of the buildings, put in front of the stores. They had no idea they were coming. They don't understand it's taking away parking spaces. It's affecting their deliveries and affecting where they place their garbage. There seems to be sort of no coordinated effort between the DOT, Department of Sanitation, et cetera, et cetera. So I really want to know, knowing that we are going to continue to increase the number of people in New York City, how you feel about our transportation, about the bike share programs, about our ferries, about everything in general in terms of how you feel we are going to overcome and make this city move a lot smoother with regard to our transportation issues.
Well, I'm happy to begin by saying I am a founding charter member of the Citibank Bike Share Program. I haven't ridden on one of the bikes yet because they're not there. I also am a charter member of, and he rolls his eyes every time I say this, but of the 2nd Avenue subway, the T train. I live on East 84th Street, a few feet off of the tunnel, and we get an explosion every day. Joe thinks that it's funny.
Progress.
But progress, it is progress. But what he thinks is funny is that every time the explosion goes, I want to run out of my house, my wife and I, but we don't know where to go. It's like an earthquake, it really is. And they don't, I won't belabor it, but they don't just set off one charge. They set off a series of charges. So you can count to 10, 1, 2, and 3. It's a really horrible experience. So help with transportation, it's on its way. I saw on Mad Men the other night that she was looking for an apartment on the Upper East Side, and the real estate woman said, this will triple in value when the 2nd Avenue subway is done. So generally speaking, I'm in favor of bicycles. I think that it's thank you.
The one person in the audience.
So somebody else. But you know, we've spent 25 years cleaning up the streets and sidewalks of New York City. So I've spent a great deal of time out on the sidewalks, and I would want to take a look at top to bottom of what appears on our sidewalks. I think that there's anarchy in a lot of places in our city with boxes that crowd things, with all kinds of things that don't belong there, legally or illegally. I would want to take a complete and comprehensive look at all street furniture, and I would be open and available to assessing each individual place, because I think that you're right, Nancy. I believe that people have no idea where these bicycle racks are going to go.
Thanks.
I don't think that they went to any of the businesses and said, did you know that your new partner is going to be this bike rack out in front? So I think that we have to take a look at that. But I don't want to mislead people by saying that I'm against bicycles. I'm going to rip them up and all of that stuff. I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
I think that it's the future.
Very good.
I agree that our bike lanes are here to stay, but I do think that the coordination between the various different city agencies has been horrific. From a point of view is that there's absolutely no coordination with the fire department and with the police department and with the various different local community boards. What we are seeing in the current administration is that each and every one of these agencies are treated as a silo. The mayor decides that a commissioner is going to be the CEO of their domain, and that CEO can do whatever they want. And that's not the way the city government needs to work. It needs to be coordinated. We're now seeing, there's an article in one of the papers today, there's an apartment building in Greenwich Village where they put the bikes rack right in front. Over in Clark Street at the number 2 and 3 train, they've put the bike rack right in front of the entrance. God forbid anything happens in that subway system and the fire department needs to get in there. Those bicycles are going to be in the way. There's been absolutely no forward planning and no coordination between all of the agencies. And that's what a mayor is supposed to do. A mayor and his or her deputy mayors need to be able to bring in all of the agency heads and say, work together. be part of a team. That's how you avoid these types of mistakes. Anybody who tells you that the first thing they're going to do when they become mayor is rip out all the bike lanes doesn't know what they're talking about, because the future of the city of New York is going to be a combination of both powered vehicles and man-powered vehicles, bicycles. We're going to have tens of thousands of bicycles put on the street within the next couple of weeks. And you look at the young people in the city of New York, who will continue to grow. They want to see more and more bicycles. Transportation is also very, very important. The current administration just put out a report and said we ought to take the subway system and bring it over to New Jersey. You got to be kidding me. Don't go to New Jersey. We have to continue the number 7 train all the way down the west side, connect so that Queens can be connected all the way to the waterfront along the Hudson River Park, and all of it all through there. And there are boroughs. Staten Island is a borough that doesn't have any mass transit. The city of New York has decided to build a water tunnel right now from Brooklyn to Staten Island. And if you're going to build a tunnel, if you understand anything about technology, whether you build a tunnel that's has a diameter of 10 feet, which is what they're doing with the water, or 30 or 40 feet, which is what they could have incorporated to continue the N or the R train. Now, it cost billions of dollars to do, but there was absolutely no discussion whatsoever between DEP and the New York City Transit Authority when they were deciding to build a tunnel between Brooklyn and Staten Island. So it's a missed opportunity. You cannot have missed opportunities when it comes to transportation. Everybody's got to sit at the table, and everybody's got to be part of it.
Thank you.
John, go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Catsimatidis.
I think we need some common sense management as far as these bike lanes. Is there a place for the bike lanes? Yes. But it shouldn't be considered punishment for the people that shot down congestion pricing in New York City, where you would punish the outer boroughs for coming into New York, or you make it miserable enough for them traffic-wise that they don't want to come to New York. There is a place for bike lanes, but we can't create congestion and block traffic. I mean, you try to go down Broadway to a Broadway play. It used to be 4 lanes. It's down to 1 lane. It's silly in a lot of respects. Everybody in the city considers it silly. So I think we have to relook at it and make a common sense approach. Do we want bikes? Yes. Do we want them in the right places where it's not going to hurt our traffic patterns in the city? Yes. And I think we should study it. Thank you.
Nancy, this is a large issue that is much more about bicycles and bicycle parking and bicycle lanes. It's really about how we're going to grow as a city. As we grow in population, how are we going to be responsible to the environment? How is it that we're going to accommodate each other in negotiating through this city, people, goods, tourists? We're up to 52 million tourists in 2012. I agree with Mayor Bloomberg's goal of 70 million tourists and visitors by 2015. They push our economy forward. 350,000 jobs associated with that industry, 90,000 just in the hotel industry. We have a shortage of hotel rooms. So here we are in a crowded city and the global city, trying to figure out how to sort of live with each other in the smartest, most sustainable, and economically robust and prosperous way. I'm a cyclist. I went to a mayoral forum. George was there. He saw me in my bike gear on Saturday.
I just have the card. He actually uses the
Yeah, I actually showed up and I biked from City Island to Cooper Union and then up to a campaign stop in the Bronx. I know, I'm showing off a little bit. And so bicycles as one form of transportation is important, and how we accommodate them. When I was in the city council, I advanced a bill that would encourage more alternatives to transportation for individuals as they move around the city. I recently just visited a European city where my daughter is doing her spring semester of her junior year in college, and what I found really interesting was that they've carved out portions of the corners for motorbikes and lots of bicycle parking. So the university kids, this particular city, Barcelona, was very bike friendly, very pedestrian friendly. And the movement of traffic was pretty decent. Obviously, it can't compare to New York City, but I think what I would do, and to give you the shorter answer, one, common sense. We've got to restore common sense to the discussion. We can't be led by the activist groups sort of hassling government and hassling Pauls, because they do jump on the city council members and sort of litmus test them about bicycles and are you going to hold the line on bicycles? Look, as a cyclist, we need to figure out how to accommodate them. I would immediately bring together, and Joe talked about this, but the whole silo busting concept. Bring together DOT, EDC, SBS, the business community, and the transportation advocates that are talking about alternatives to transportation, the mass transit community, and say, folks, let's figure out how we can get these trucks in and out of here in a smart way. Let's figure out how we can accommodate more motorcycle and bike parking. Let's figure out how we can make places more pedestrian friendly. And let's figure out how we can articulate better relationships between modes of transportation so that people will get out of their cars and use mass transit, which is much smarter and much more comfortable. And it takes a lot of stress out of your life when you're not behind the wheel anyway.
Okay, thank you. We are going to move on to Jack Friedman from the Queen's Chamber.
Thank you. And as a proud Queens guy who bleeds orange and blue, it's great to be in Brooklyn today, bleeding black and white after a net victory, because last week we had a rough time. And again, you got to believe, down 3-2, Brooklynites don't give up. That's right. We're going to take this thing. I want to talk about Hurricane Sandy because it's had an impact on beachfront communities in every borough. And the money's trickling in, really trickling in from the federal government. We have tremendous infrastructure and transportation problems in the Rockaways. Commuters can't get to and from work. We're coming up to the summer, and businesses rely on the tourists and the visitors to that beachfront community for a living. I'm down there constantly looking at businesses going out of business and struggling. What would be your plans, and I'm talking about immediate plans because it needs immediate action to face some of these infrastructure and transportation problems communities like Rockaway and all the other beachfront communities in New York City are facing right now post-Sandy?
And if I can jump in and just sort of sharpen the question a little bit, cite the number one thing. What would be your number one priority as mayor in dealing with the issues that Jack talked about? Let's start with you, Joe.
Number one priority would never again have a situation with a natural disaster where the city doesn't have an incident commander. In the Giuliani administration, we opened up and developed the Office of Emergency Management. And the whole point of that was in any single natural disaster, there would be one incident commander in charge. And it hasn't happened in this administration. And so what you saw in the Rockaways in particular, in the very first days, and I was there in the very first days going on, it were the churches, it was the not-for-profits who were trying to coordinate the effort. And you remember what happened when the mayor actually did go down to the Rockaways on Thursday of that week and what happened and how he needed to be taken away from that location for his own safety. What the issue is, no, it's true. Mm-hmm. The issue overall is going forward from a transportation standpoint. The bridge that connected the A train from Queens, the main part of Queens out there actually collapsed and was destroyed. It's being rebuilt on an expedited basis, and my understanding is it should be opened in June of this year. That'll allow the A train to continue. The fact of the matter is, the bus system that's been put in place is just taking way too long because of the traffic that's going on both of the bridges that go in and out of there. The bridge is being refortified with a wall. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, so that in the event of a surge, a 14-foot to 15-foot surge, that the bridge would be stable and made in such a way. And there's been great help from the federal government in connection with building that bridge because of the licensing that's necessary given what's there. I think overall from a transportation standpoint and continuing the businesses there, I think the most important part of the city overall is, in answer to my original question, what is the one thing that you would do? And that is have one person in charge coordinating. When you look at what happened both in Queens and in the Rockaways, as well as in Staten Island, whenever all of the agencies come together, they all come together and they all have to talk and they all give their programs and they're not coordinated. That's unacceptable in the city. and should never happen again.
Okay. George, looked like you wanted to respond.
The Doe Fund, the organization that I founded and run, has been working out in the Rockaways right from the very beginning in Coney Island and Staten Island. We're right now cleaning up parks out there. I would have to I agree with Joe, of course, about the immediate concerns, but the long-range concerns, I believe, present a great opportunity for jobs, for investment, and for hardening our infrastructure, not only in the Rockaways, but also downtown and Staten Island, and actually almost every borough has been affected by it. But I would take exception, Joe, to what you said about the mayor having to be taken away from visiting the storm because of concerns for his safety. As I recall the incident, there was one person said something to him, and he referred them to his press person, and they left.
No, I'd encourage you to look at the tape from New York Morning Herald and send it to
with
you.
all due
How it
respect,
was
with
sorted out.
all due respect, I believe that the mayor made an appearance there, and one person shouted at him, and he left. You know, I don't know why we'd have to take a knock at Mayor Bloomberg over Sandy, but you seem to want to do that. So I don't.
Because the city wasn't prepared.
Well, that's
It was
what
disastrous.
that's what you say. But
Why is this important, gentlemen?
Let's move on.
As they say in the Bronx, just saying.
Well, it may be important because I'm bringing it up, Alfonso. I mean,
George, give us your one priority, and then we'll keep.
I already did. I agree with Joe.
So this time I'm not going to introduce John Catsimatidis, our special guest. I'm going to jump ahead.
Adolfo Carrión will be.
Thank you. I think there are. The first thing I would do is set up an office at City Hall for two people. One of them is my friend Sean Donovan, who's in charge of this on the side of the federal government. And the other would be our deputy mayor of operations, my deputy mayor of operations. And the number one priority, because we know that we're already well underway spending I guess it's about $6.5 billion that's coming to us. It sounds like, and I knock on wood, that we will, our purse will be refilled fully by the federal government. So we're well on our way restoring NYCHA. We're well on our way restoring the schools that were damaged. We're well on our way in the mass transit system. I know because I'm very familiar with what the MTA is doing. They've got a $2 billion program underway right now. They're pushing RFPs out the door. They're asking for waivers on rules to get things done faster. I think the number one thing for me, Errol, would be get people back in their homes as quickly as possible if they choose to stay in those battered areas. And all the mechanics associated with that, number one. And number two, get businesses, Jack, back up and running, because it's about the economy. At the end of the day, we cannot allow these businesses to fall away, and these people who have risked their life savings and are betting on New York to shut their doors and not be able to conduct business.
Okay, thank you. And we've got Linda Barron with a question from these. Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Earl always excludes me.
No, just.
It's okay. I mean, you're prejudiced. What are you going to do?
Please.
Oh,
Never, John. Go.
I'm not taking it personally.
me.
I believe that the federal government has gone much too slow in providing the money, providing the people to help Staten Island, Brooklyn. And it is a sin, and somebody should be yelling a little bit about that. But I'm also a big picture person. I believe that the city has not had infrastructure in many, many years. People come from overseas and they laugh at some of our infrastructure. I've been talking to investment bankers, and we're close to having good discussions of creating a $100 billion fund with a new 50-year bond program to create 20,000 to 30,000 jobs that will be concentrated just on infrastructure. I'm not a person that talks about this and that. I'm a person that likes to visualize a bigger picture. I want to create those 20, 30,000 jobs, create that $100 billion just to do infrastructure for our city that hasn't been done in 20 or 30 years. Thank you.
Would just to clarify that, would that give special priority to the areas damaged by the hurricane?
A lot of it will be assigned to those areas. Now, you got to remember, I'm one of the few. I am building in Coney Island. We have zoning to build 3 towers on Coney Island, which we are beginning this spring or early summer.
Okay.
But you can't, you got to build qualified housing. You can't build something that, if the wind blows too hard, it just falls over.
Okay.
So,
Yes, Linda.
combination.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming this morning to the forum. As you know, Staten Island transportation is a major issue on Staten Island. Some of the statistics are is that if we were a state, we would collect the 7th highest tolls in the nation, and we have one of the longest commutes in the nation. But the question that I have today is on behalf of the 8.5 million people who rely on our transportation system every single day. This past year, the MTA implemented yet another fare and toll increase. This move represents the 4th increase in the last 5 years and is expected to bring in an additional $450 million a year for the MTA, which has struggled to close its budget deficit even before Sandy caused $5 billion in damage to its systems. What would you do to solve the MTA funding crisis, and what would you do to ensure that the burden of filling such a gap falls equally on all New York commuters?
Linda, if I could take since I was there when the fair went into place, let me get an opportunity. In 2009, in 2009, Governor Patterson, the Majority Leader Sampson, and the Speaker Silver took hundreds of millions of dollars away from the MTA and made the following decision, both in a memorandum of understanding as well as in a press release. Said the following, that there will be fare and toll increases every 2 years until, essentially, they didn't say this, but I'll say it, until the cows come home. There was a fare increase in 2009, there was one in 11, there was one in 13 this year, there's one in 15, there's one in 17, there's one in 19. They're all on the books right now. And in fact, as I've mentioned this over and over again, and I did at the board meetings, it's got to stop at the MTA. What they're doing and mistreating, especially Staten Island, with the bridges and tunnels, there's only one way to get off that island, either going to New Jersey through the Port Authority or going over the Verrazano Bridge through the MTA bridges and tunnels. Right now, that toll is $15 round trip. It's $15 round trip to go from the Bronx to Queens as well. They are the highest tolls in the country, and it's outrageous, and it needs to stop. But what's on the books now is that the toll is supposed to go up from $15 to $7.25 in 2 years, $20 in 4 years. It's got to stop. And what's worse is that those bridges and tunnels generate a surplus, currently of $600 million, fully almost a little over a third, almost 38 to 39% of the total receipts that come in. Fact of the matter is, the system is broken, and I have recommended, both when I was at the MTA and I'm recommending as I'm running for mayor, is that the MTA must relinquish its bridges and tunnels and give them back to the city of New York. And the decisions need to be made both by the mayor and by the city council as to what the toll should be. There is nothing that suppresses economic development more than the fact of how much it costs to go from one borough to another borough. The MTA, even though it has, the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, those bridges and tunnels only connect the 5 boroughs. And having people make decisions in Albany about the tolls for the 5 boroughs of the city of New York makes absolutely no sense. I can go on and on and on and say that the reason for the increase, I'll get it, the reason for the increase, most importantly, while I was there, the discretionary costs went down in 2012, less than they were in 2011. Anything that was under the control of management of the MTA was less. What wasn't going down was the cost of pensions. Pensions went up 17.5%. Healthcare went up 10%. Those 2 items alone were what necessary to provide that the increase that was required both on the subways at 25 cents and on the bridges. And
To the other candidates, is there a consensus that New York City should take over control of the MTA?
Yes, I think I suggested it in the first debate.
Mr. Carrión, no?
No.
Different? And Mr. Catsimatidis?
I think the MTA is broken. I think it should be broken apart, separated. We could put it to a voter referendum. And I think, Joe, when you were there, and you know, I love you dearly, you know that, you should have put your foot down and said no increases. And that's what you call leadership. I would put my foot down and say no increases. And I don't
John,
mean
John,
anything.
you can say that, but the requirement is they had to balance the budget. And when I spent less year over year, but was required to make these statements, combined with the fact that the state of New York continued to reduce the amount of revenues that it provided. So I put my foot down and then say what? That they're in a deficit situation and I've got to lay off people? I thought this whole point of this debate was about jobs.
It is
Not
about
laying
jobs. No, it is about jobs.
It's about the
But
tolls
it's-
being too
it's-
damn high.
I agree.
That's what it's about. And who raised the tolls before they left the
And
MTA?
you know, it comes down
My
to,
friend Joe.
I did.
And he
I
said
did.
it was an act of political courage.
and it comes down to whom do you trust not to raise your taxes
Errol.
and not to raise your tolls.
Let me jump in here.
Cheap shot, John, cheap shot.
But I love you.
You know,
Suit is the cheap shot.
John always says, you know, I love you just before a zinger. We're getting used to that. But let me address this, Linda, because I think, you know, cities and metros around the country are scurrying around trying to figure out how to balance their budgets when they're burdened by legislatures that are abandoning the systems, by governors that are abandoning the systems, by employee burdens of health benefits and pensions that are ballooning beyond control, where we're going to have to really, you know, sort of re-deal and retool those relationships. But let's go to sort of the backdrop of this. What causes this in the first place? And I think that certainly if I were mayor of New York City, on January 1, what I would do is take up the advocacy and championing role that this mayor took with gun control, which he made it a national conversation. We need to make mass transit funding, financing, viability, safety, and growth of that infrastructure a national issue. It is about our future. We're going to be 120 more million people by mid-century. We're going to have to build 200 billion square feet of floor space for living and doing business, let alone moving people and goods. And here's the problem. We don't have a national transportation bill. We have 85 cents of every federal transportation dollar that goes to highways, and 15 cents of that dollar goes to mass transit. So, you know, this is not about defending Joe Lhota. Joe, I love you, but I'm going to show you real love. I'm going to show you real love. There is a problem. Every executive out there has the problem, and we're going to have to deal with this. And the mayor of New York City, having the bully pulpit that he or she has, should take that mantle up and become the biggest champion for mass transit and smart growth in the country and the world. And I would do that.
And put their foot down, right?
And of course, put their foot down.
Okay, gentlemen. I'm going to ask Jennifer and Rob to, I don't know how you split it up, but to ask your.
I feel like we should say we love Joe, too.
I'm going to tweet it now.
Thank you, Carl.
This is a love fest for Joe.
Pick on the Brooklyn. Go ahead.
No, we got to stick.
Gentlemen, as you know, there are 67 bids throughout the 5 boroughs. In coming up with our question, we consulted with our colleagues, and there's one common issue that's arisen among all the other business improvement districts, and that's vending. I should point out we are not opposed to general vending, food carts, food trucks, but right now in this city there's an inconsistency of regulations and laws, even on a block-by-block basis, to the extent the police, who are the enforcement agents, don't understand the laws as they apply to vending. In addition, vendors, I should note, clog sidewalks. They can create unsanitary conditions. They operate under entirely different and less restrictive rules and regulations as brick and mortar establishments. And finally, they do not pay rent, prorated share of property taxes, or bid assessments. So, with that having been said, we'd like to ask if you would support a comprehensive plan that would regulate the location, type, and number of vending carts and trucks, and rationalize vending in general throughout the city.
I'm going to take that one first. You know why? I suffer in that predicament. One of my companies, which is Catsimatidis, we have cart people. You know, we sell bananas. We have cart people right in front of our doorstep that pay no taxes, no workman's comp, they pay a small permit fee, and they have no costs. And meanwhile, I'm paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate taxes, workman's comp, and unemployment insurance, all kinds of taxes. And they're selling bananas for half price in front of my own store. That is wrong. The permits that are given out, we want these people to work, but the permits that are given out should be in a specific area, and they shouldn't be selling product in front of the stores that are trying to do business and following the rules of our city, paying the taxes in our city, paying the people on the books in our city. I'd like to see how many of those people file a tax return. There's a place for vendors. There is a place for vendors. And we should put them in a certain area and allow people to go shopping there. And I'm not looking to hurt them, but the store owners that work hard, I'm one of those store owners that started 40 years ago, working 7 days a week. They deserve a break and not get punished by the vendors in front of their own store selling the same product that they're selling.
And you support comprehensive legislation?
I support the fact that if they're given a permit, they can't be within, pick a number, 300 feet, 500 feet of a store selling the same product.
Fair enough.
I actually believe the distinction between the two, between the carts that John is talking about and the vans, I think the question that was asked about. I think actually, you know, quite honestly, John, there was a period of time when the city of New York said no to carts on the street unless they had a First Amendment right to do it, and it was left to only veterans, and it was books. Quite honestly, they shouldn't be allowed to sell those products on the streets of New York, and we do need comprehensive reform. It's not an anti-jobs position. It's a rationality of a quality of life and what we need to have on our streets. As far as the vans are concerned, they're a completely different and unique item where, you know, you see people, they're actually, you know, they're making pizza on the street. They're selling all kinds of foods, all kinds of ethnic-related foods, which are absolutely fabulous. But they are not paying taxes. They're not being reviewed by the Department of Health. They move from place to place. Some of them are in the same positions all the time. Others move from place to place. If you want a certain type of Belgian waffle, you'll get a tweet that'll tell you what corner that they're on. It's all part of their business strategy. The fact of the matter is, absolutely, we need comprehensive reform. Errol, whether it's in the form of legislation or whether it's in the form of the city making regulations about how it should do. You want to talk about traffic problems? They cause traffic problems. They're parked in all parts of the city, every single borough of the city, and they are very much problematic. And all businesses need to be treated the same. And I'm not looking at it from a bureaucratic standpoint. It's the last thing in the world I think it should be. It should be fair, it should be equitable, and everybody ought to be treated the same. Taxes, fees, and overall making sure that the food is healthy and of the quality that New York is used to.
And one of the things that happens is that the vendors will park and feed the meter all day long and work out of their car, which is illegal, by the way.
Right.
You're not supposed to do that, but when I approach a traffic enforcement agent, they run away from me rather than listen to, you know, why they should be giving the person a ticket, which makes me think something that's not so good. The traffic enforcement person and the vendor see each other every day. I don't see either one of them every day. So we clean 150 miles of city streets and sidewalks every day. We clean in front of all of John's supermarkets, for example,
You do a good job.
Great, John. Then maybe you can make a donation. I see you doing that all over town these days.
I believe in charity.
Yeah, charity in an election year. In any event,
That's not
I was
true.
talking, John. I'm talking. Just let me finish my few seconds here, John, and everything will be fine. Okay? So we clean 150 miles of the city streets and sidewalks every day, and we're very familiar with the obstacles to our work and to your businesses. And if you go to East 86th Street, for example, you'll find that there is no vendor enforcement. It ends with Rob. I mean, Rob is on them all day long. In the Bloomingdale's 59th Street area, they do a great job, the East Midtown partnership. But everybody moves up to East 86th Street. So if you go to East 86th Street, it's like a third world country. And there's no enforcement of any regulations. So the first thing I would want to do would be enforce the regulations that are on the books now and get the people to get the tickets that they're supposed to get for operating out of their vehicles on the sidewalk. Next, I would definitely be in favor of the comprehensive legislation. And I would look forward to that because I don't think that we ought to have uneven enforcement of the law. And I believe, though, that there's a necessity for a lot of what is sold on the street. I can remember back in the days when I was a messenger, a K-Scholler, and a hot dog, or an apple, or a banana on the street was really all I could afford. That's where I ate. But, and it was good, and got me through the time.
Okay.
So, Rob, the short answer is yes. And the not so long answer, but still short, is it is an issue of fairness and equity and ensuring that we continue to create an environment that is fertile for investment. I think that having this street vendor phenomenon run amok creates a disincentive for investment. It doesn't make any sense anymore to pour your life savings into building a good store and a business and a stable business, and then having somebody outside your door selling that same product at an exceedingly deeper discount and gaming the market. So it's really common sense stuff. So the short answer is yes. Let's regulate. Let's create rules of engagement. Let's make sure that people are living by those rules. At the same time, there's another side to this coin, which is that R.H. Macy used to be a street vendor. And if you go back to Orchard Street in the early part of the last century, a lot of those street vendors became storekeepers. So there is a healthy balance where we keep the environment fertile for investment and allow some street vending to happen in a smart and legal way.
Okay, so gentlemen, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. I want to thank the members of the various chambers who came here, and of course the Brooklyn Chamber and St. Francis College for hosting us. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning, and please join me in thanking the candidates.
All across the nation, Americans are ready to rock the vote in record numbers. And no matter what side of the ballot you plan to punch, voting is your responsibility. But have you ever thought of it as a privilege? There are about 45,000 New Yorkers on parole. They're people who've completed part of their prison term and have been released by the parole board. Parolees have to undergo random drug tests, meet regularly with their parole officer, and expect unannounced check-in visits. One thing they cannot expect is to vote, because in New York State, incarcerated felons and those on parole can't.
Not being able to vote, it was hard. It was hard because I couldn't even speak my voice. My voice was silenced.
New York state law says if convicted and sentenced to incarceration, the felon cannot vote until the end of their sentence or their discharge from parole. But does a jail cell in your past mean a voting booth shouldn't be in your future? Many former felons have been led to believe the answer is yes. A New York Civil Liberties Union study found workers at a third of the state's local election boards thought that those on probation couldn't vote. And in Brooklyn, the local election board even required convicts to present unnecessary documents like letters from parole officers and judges before they could register. The law is clear. If you've done your time, then you're free to vote. City Council member Charles Barron represents a district with a significant parolee population.
Your rights should not be taken away from you because you commit a crime. And then our people should know in New York State that you can vote if you're a convicted felon.
Stephen Holmes is a director at Serendipity 1 in Bed-Stuy, a residential program that provides services for those leaving the justice system.
A lot of the guys were informed that if they had a felony, they weren't allowed to vote. Not true. We did our homework. We put it out there that they could, and then once we found out those that qualified, we had no problem taking 22 guys by hand down to the registration office.
Tavon and Jonathan both registered and are looking forward to their first election.
Well, I'm excited about it. Like, I've never been to the polls, period. So just to be inside of there and be able to post my ballot and hope, cross my fingers at the end of the day it counts.
In New York State, 16% of the population is black, but they account for 54% of those in prison and half of those on parole. Latinos make up 15% of our state population and account for 27% of those behind bars and a third of those on parole. Critics of felony disenfranchisement say those numbers do not equal crime and punishment, but add up to a direct assault on civil rights.
This is an issue of democracy. It's an issue of voting rights. It's a civil rights issue. It's one of the most pressing and important civil rights issue of our time and of the future.
Erica Wood heads the Right to Vote Project, a national campaign to restore voting rights to people with criminal records, housed at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU.
We're not trying to affect a campaign or affect a particular political race. This is all about people exercising their right to vote once they're back in the community. And it's really a matter of being a stakeholder in the community, having a voice in the community. And it's everything from voting in the local school board election all the way up to the presidential election.
The U.S. Census counts prisoners as residents of the communities where they're incarcerated. The state uses those numbers for redistricting to determine state and federal representation. Here in New York, every prison built since 1982 has been upstate. It gives them more influence while diminishing the voting strength of communities of color.
These laws do have a disproportionate impact on African American communities. And let's be very clear, these laws are firmly rooted in the Jim Crow era of our country. They were passed in state constitutions in the South right alongside poll taxes and literacy tests, yet they're still around today.
I paid my debt to society, you know. It was a long time. You know, I was young, so I made my mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. People that are in bad situations, they should still be given a chance to vote. They still have a voice, you know? They still have a voice.
For Brooklyn Review, I'm Brian Vines. In November of 2008, voters in Bed-Stuy waited in line for hours to cast their vote in Obama versus the other guy. In September 2010, voters filled the gymnasium at the Shorefront Y in Coney Island to make another timely decision: chocolate or vanilla. Okay, this is a fake election, but it's real practice for using the city's new electronic voting machines. After the ballot dispute in Florida during the 2000 elections, Congress passed the Help America Vote Act in 2002. Some 8 years and $50 million later, New York City's Board of Elections is bringing electoral politics in the city into the digital age. And the wise director of Family Services, Susanna Levitt, thought it was important to bring the voting machines directly to the community.
This is one of the steps to getting the vote out and to be heard. That's why I thought it's very important to bring the Department of Election here and showing on our premises how to operate the new voting machine.
The Shorefront Y is just one of hundreds of stops on the Board of Elections' campaign to introduce city voters to the new machines that are part standardized test and part ATM, but all new to those used to the old lever-pulling machines. Voters like Francis Rabin. Remember your first election that you voted in?
Oh, God. I was going to say FDR, but I don't think I was that old.
Well, it's out with the old and in with the touchscreen, as New Yorkers are urged to vote the new way. Get it, mark it, and scan it.
So once you have your ballot in hand, you're ready to get behind a privacy screen, where you're going to take your ballots and fill in your answer bubbles completely. Favorite ice cream, vacation destination, we'll take a little cruise. Best pizza topping, let's say pineapple. So once you filled in your answers here, completely circling the bubbles in there, you're ready for the voting machine.
The process seems straightforward enough, but the new machines are not without controversy. The Brennan Center for Justice at the NYU School of Law is representing the New York State Conference of the NAACP and the Working Families Party in a lawsuit, saying the setup is confusing and thousands of votes will be disqualified, particularly those from communities of color and non-native English speakers, communities like Coney Island, with its large Russian-speaking population. And while the machines operate in Chinese, Korean, and Spanish, Russian is not available. Esther is doubly concerned as a non-native English-speaking voter and a Pole.
Yes, everybody worry, everybody nervous, because we want everything to be correct and right, but everything can be happened.
Nervousness and lawsuits aside, this is the only way to vote in New York City.
Some people, it takes longer and they can find it difficult, but eventually I think it'll be fine.
To give the new machines a try before the election, visit www.votethenewwayny.com and find the location of a demonstration near you. For Brooklyn Review, this is registered voter Brian Vines.